Let's talk about integrations. We can perform some integrations with Salesforce Flow. So we're going to see how we can perform a basic integration between Salesforce and MailChimp. There's going to be some terminologies that you may not be familiar with, some concepts that you and I might not fully understand. This is the nature of this. We keep learning, we keep exploring. So let's see how this works. So we're going to be performing an integration between two systems. And the way this works with an HTTP integration is that we're going to send a request, an HTTP request. Let's just take that HTTP out of the way. We're going to be sending a request from one system to another. And that request can be of different types. Each one of those is a method. So this method can be a get, to retrieve information, a post to send information, a delete to delete information. And then after the request is sent, the other system is going to send back a response. That response is going to have the data that we are requesting. It could have also a response, it will have a response status such as 200, as in this was a successful response, or 400. There are some other values, 400 if it's not a successful response, and then what the error was. We'll be setting up an integration between Salesforce and MailChimp. Now, there are some steps that at a high level, this is like what we're going to do for every integration, but then there are some small details for each one of those steps that are not identical, that are not typical. So there are things that we will need to research, and there is a fair degree of research associated with integrations. And then we will also need to reference the documentation, Salesforce documentation for how to use HTTP callouts, how to use the action in Salesforce flows, and then the API documentation of the other system. What's the base URL? What's the API key? So there is research and documentation all the time when it comes to integration. So you don't have to know how it works from A to Z. You just need to know the high level steps, and then for each step we're going to do this research and look at the documentations together in this. So the first step is to set up external credential. And in external credentials, we're going to specify the authentication protocol. Basically, does the other system require authentication or not? If it does require authentication, what type of authentication? Is it just a username and a password? Is it an API key? Is there no authentication required? And we can just connect without authentication. And then we're going to set up a principal. And this is where we set up the some authentication parameters like the key and the value. So key value pairs, something like API key, and then the value of that API key is that. And this is a piece of information that we will get from the system that we are integrating with. We'll then set up the principal access, and this is basically who gets to access and send requests of the principal that we just set up. And this is basically creating a permission set, adding that principal to that permission set, and assigning this permission set to the users that we need them to be able to make requests. The header is it might be optional, in which where when the authentication is required, then we need to send some information to the other system. The other system is expecting that authentication, like it needs to know who are you, like are you allowed to make a request, and it is expecting to receive the keyword authorization in the name or the key, and then the value is going to be the API key in a certain format. And I got this from Salesforce documentation, this format here. I'll show you that and how it works exactly. Very briefly here, the credential here is referring to the external credential, and then the dot notation to access, and then which external credential. So this is where we put the API name of the external credential, and then we reference my client ID here. It could be replaced with whatever value we put here in the key. So if we replace my client ID with API key, then this is going to return the value of that API key, and then we send that as part of the request to the other system. The other system sees the value, which is the API key, so it confirms that this is someone that, or some system that is allowed to perform this request. We'll see how this works in action in the next recording. And then we're going to set up named credential, and this is where we specify the base URL. And this is another piece of information that we get from the other system, from the documentation, or from the account that we set up. And then there are some other settings as well in named credentials. And then the last thing we're gonna do is the actual flow action. You see, like, there's 5 steps before we actually start working with flows. In the flow, we're gonna create an action called HTTP callout, and then we specify the method, and then we specify the URL path, the base URL. After the base URL, we could extend it with a slash, and then the information that we're trying to retrieve. Are we retrieving campaigns? Then it could be slash campaigns. Are we retrieving audiences? Then it could be slash audiences, or subscribers, or else. So this is the URL path, and then this is a piece of information we'll also get from the system that we are connecting with, and the method as well. All of this is part of the documentation that the other system is providing. And then there is also query parameters. If, for example, that we are looking for a particular person or a particular subscriber, then we need to send a parameter from Salesforce, something like the name of the person, and then the other system is going to receive that name. So this is a query parameter. And once we have a successful response, then what do we do with this response? To create records in Salesforce? Do we just display some data? And so on. So these are the high-level steps.